So hello and welcome to this Marada Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture series discussion that we are hosting on new mobility. Today we are going to talk about hydrogen mobility specifically, but we'll also touch upon new mobility concepts in general. Today we are very fortunate to have a very special guest, a guest who really needs no introduction here in Pune, but I'll just mention a few lines about him. We have Mr. Ravi Pandit, who's the group chairman and founder of KPIT. He has been involved in the tech information technology sector for over 30 years and has been involved with various industries, not just information technology. And one of his latest focus areas, and I would say passion, has been new mobility and new energy and new R&D around it. So we will talk a lot about that and try to learn a lot about the interesting things that are happening in this space. We will also touch upon some of the things at a broader ecosystem level that are happening in Pune, specifically in this area as well. But one of the main focus areas today will be hydrogen mobility, and you'll soon find out why we are going to touch upon hydrogen mobility and specifically talk about Mr. Ravi Pandit about it. About 2 months back in October, KPIT, along with CSIR's National Chemical Laboratory, which is based in Pune, did India's first prototype of a hydrogen fuel cell car. And that was a very interesting, very path-breaking milestone for India. And we are fortunate that it was done right here in Pune. So we definitely want to learn a lot about that. So let me quickly get started since we have only about 30 minutes. So I'd like to start by asking you, Mr. Pandit, can you talk about this new prototype that was built and the experience in doing that, and what were the goals behind doing this prototype and what next? And let's get started with that, and then we can come about the broader picture around hydrogen mobility.
So, as you rightly mentioned, Amit, we have been passionate about automotive, especially about clean transportation. I believe that the world cannot, and especially India cannot, have a future with fossil fuels. India is importing huge amounts of fossil fuel. That is our largest import item. It has an effect on our foreign exchange. It has an effect on our incomes of people. It has an impact on the pollution in our cities. Probably 8 out of top 10 polluted cities are in India. And therefore, we have been very, very passionately involved with everything that can reduce the pollution in the country. Now, when you come to clean transportation, we have to segment the overall transportation into two parts. One is the intercity part and the second is intracity part. As far as intercity public transportation is concerned, it seems to us that batteries will be a viable option. Of course, we will have to do innovations in batteries, and I'll talk about it later. So that we have to do innovations so that, Bolivia and China and possibly Peru and Afghanistan don't become tomorrow's Saudi and Kuwait and all of that. So we have to do some innovation in batteries. But when it comes to long distance transportation, batteries probably will not be a very viable option, considering the limits to the energy density per kg that a battery can have. So when it comes to long distance commercial transportation, we believe that hydrogen is the only way forward. Hydrogen is the universe's second largest present element. It is available everywhere. It is available wherever there is light, wherever there is water, wherever there is adequate sunshine to generate biomass. And in the interim period, whatever fossil fuels you have, you can make hydrogen out of it. So when it comes to hydrogen, we don't have to depend on any external country. If we look at hydrogen from biomass, it can also help our farmers to increase their income. And lastly, and very importantly, it is probably the cleanest fuel that can be used. Now, obviously, there have been companies in the world who have been making hydrogen fuel cells. But you see, those who have been making fuel cells are few. Their costs are very high. There was recently a presentation by Ballard, which talks about, they say that in the US, the cost of a fuel cell will be like $1,500 per kilowatt.
Right.
In Europe, it is $1,200 per kilowatt. So clearly, this very, very valuable, very important technology is too high priced for India. And our motivation in doing the fuel cell in India was to actually bring in the possibility of making affordable fuel cells in India. These fuel cells can be used in mobility applications. They can also be used in various other applications where the difficulty of taking power lines to all the places is very high. So therefore, our insistence of working on the fuel cell, we have been at it for a few years now, 5 years or so. Now, you see, there are a couple of things. A fuel cell by itself is not of any use. You need a complete electric powertrain.
Correct.
So we have been working on electric powertrain again for many years now, actually. So that includes an appropriately designed motor and controller and a power transmission unit and a battery management system and the whole lot. So we have been working on that. So fuel cell becomes a part of that. Again, with fuel cell, you need a certain balance of plant because, as you know, fuel cell needs oxygen and it needs hydrogen. So how do you give it at what compression and all of that? You need a balance of plant. And lastly, apart from the fuel cell and the electric powertrain and the balance of plant, you need hydrogen. So you need, so you need to work with someone who will give the hydrogen. So we have been working on all these aspects. And the least, Amit, that we should do is that to leave for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren a clean air.
Absolutely.
All these activities actually are driven towards that.
I think I think I'll add clean air and also from a national strategic interest standpoint, energy security. I mean, we can't keep depending on external powers or external countries for something as basic as energy. So I think even from that standpoint, I think hydrogen is an important fuel. But hydrogen fuel, especially hydrogen fuel cells, have been discussed for a long time. I remember even in the 90s, there was a lot of discussion with the automakers about using hydrogen fuel cells. And this was before the lithium-ion electric vehicles era had really come into being, even though that technology was also around. And big companies, really big companies like Toyota and BMW invested a lot, or probably are still investing a lot in this area. And then suddenly, as we saw 10 years back, someone by the name Elon Musk showed up and clearly pushed the lithium-ion technology forward. And now everyone seems to be in a rush to adopt that. I'm of the personal view that, we are so short of energy and transportation that we need all options on the table, all possible options on the table. So it's not really one or the other. It should be one and the other. But would like to understand your views on lithium-ion versus hydrogen fuel cells and what has changed in the hydrogen fuel cells technology in the last 10, 20 years to make it more viable.
Yeah. So, the most popular tongue-in-the-cheek sentence has been hydrogen is the fuel of the future and will always be. Well, I think the future is here.
Right.
So a couple of things. I believe that in any evolved system, there are always multiple players. Our forests are not full of only trees of only single type.
Right.
Our flora and fauna are not all uniform. So similarly, our energy solutions cannot be, single. Right. They will be heterogeneous. And there is a place for batteries and there is a place for fuel cells. And I mentioned earlier, especially long distance transportation, especially commercial vehicles, I think there is a big room for fuel cells. Now, what has changed? Why is hydrogen here now? I think the concern about climate has been never been this high in our past. You can see that almost every major country in the world has now a clean air mission, and they all have hydrogen missions.
Right.
So suddenly the desire to look at an alternate to the fossil fuels has come up. And as has been said that, the Stone Age didn't get over because we ran out of stone. Similarly, the oil age is not getting over because we ran out of oil, because people will need a better solution. So the push for an alternate is such that has never been before. Secondly, every technology takes some years, sometimes some decades to actually mature. So if you were to look at a company like Ballard, who has been in fuel cells for last, I don't know, 50 years, they claim, who have probably accumulated losses of $1 billion so far, $1 billion. I think that is the investment in development of a technology. And luckily now the world is a single place when it comes to innovation. And you can use, you can, as Newton said, you can stand on the shoulders of the earlier generation. You can learn from what has been researched elsewhere. And you can put in your own innovation to make an expensive technology domestically affordable. And that is what we have done. So I believe that the time for hydrogen is now, because not only there is a demand pull, but there is also the potential of breaking the price barriers and making solutions available at prices which are affordable even in a country like India.
That's great to hear. I think one of the main questions that comes up, and you briefly alluded to it a few minutes back, is where do we get the hydrogen? And there's this discussion about green hydrogen versus blue hydrogen versus gray hydrogen. I guess depends on whether you get it from electrolysis using energy, hopefully green energy, or from fossil fuels, or from biomass. What is your sense specifically for India? What would be our primary sources? And the follow-up question to that, and one question and concern that's constantly brought up, especially with respect to hydrogen, is transportation and supply chain of hydrogen once we have generated it by whatever mechanism. So what developments are happening in that area?
Very interesting question, Amit. So a couple of things. I think acceptance of the color of hydrogen is, in my opinion, a matter of the time of evolution. Okay. Like in any other technology, the cost of fuel cells will come down by scale. So the way I would look at it is, at the initial stage, we should not worry about the color of the hydrogen till we increase the scale of the fuel cells and bring down the cost of the fuel cells. See, I talked about $1,500 per kilowatt. Department of Energy, US, is saying that if there are 500,000 kilowatts of fuel cells, the cost per kilowatt of fuel cell will be $60. So 1,500 to 60. Now, that is clearly a matter of scale. That's clearly a matter of scale. Once you have a high scale of fuel cell manufacture, you can afford to pay a little bit more for hydrogen. And then you can be very choosy about the color of the hydrogen. Because clearly, a gray hydrogen coming from fossil fuel is bound to be less expensive than the green hydrogen, because the nature has done 50% of the work of converting, the normal hydrocarbons into a usable stage where they can be converted into hydrogen. So I would think that we should look at gray or blue initially and green very shortly thereafter, knowing fully well that even cost of green hydrogen is coming down. So in this context, if you were to look at the spectrum of availability, clearly you can look at natural gas imported or LNG imported. You can look at natural gas which is made within the country, and you can look at coal to methanol to hydrogen route as an immediate solutions. I think the oil marketing companies in the country should look at this and first flood the country with hydrogen, low cost hydrogen. That to me is the first thing. The second thing, of course, that you need to look at, we all need to look at, is green hydrogen. Green hydrogen coming from two sources. Of course, from electrolysis and biomass either gasification or methanation. Now, we have fortunately a lot of biomass available.
Right.
More than that, we have a lot of land available which can be actually cultivated for this. So our calculations show that biomass usage either from waste, agri-waste, or from energy farming is an affordable alternative. And then you can look at methanation through a variety of technologies that are currently available. They can have the benefit of not only making hydrogen available, but also in the case of agri-waste, reducing pollution. In the case of energy farming, increasing farmers' income. Both these possibilities are there. The third is, of course, electrolysis. In the case of electrolysis also, we have to ensure that the cost of electrolyzers is less and the cost of energy is less. See, it seems today that energy at maybe 1.5 rupee per kilowatt or 1.8 rupees per unit or kilowatt hour is something at which hydrogen can become affordable. So we have work to do in terms of bringing down the cost of energy as well as the cost of electrolyzer. The last question, of course, is the most important question of transportation. Hydrogen, is very light. And either you have to expend a lot of energy converting that into liquid or very high pressure vehicles. Either you have to do that or you have to look at distributed generation of hydrogen. So clearly, when you are looking at a fossil fuel, you can look at reformation of natural gas because now gas pipelines are there everywhere in the country. So you can look at distributed generation of hydrogen through natural gas. Methanol is very easy to carry everywhere. You can look at distributed reformation of methanol doing that. Luckily, biomass is everywhere. Right. And energy transfer, power, energy, electricity transfer is not too expensive.
Right.
So I would think that we need to come up with a distributed generation of hydrogen from all these multiple sources.
Right.
And you can look at hydrogen plants of maybe multiples of 2 tons per day, 2 tons or 4 tons per day, located at multiple locations. Typically, a 2 ton per day will fuel 200 commercial vehicles a day. And we can have a whole stream of these plants everywhere. Much like now we are looking at distributed generation of electricity, we will have to look at distributed generation of hydrogen. There are, of course, people who are working on, KPIT included, who are looking at potentially storage of hydrogen and transportation of hydrogen in a solid state. But we don't have an answer today.
Okay. The other related question to that is, I think that's something that even a high school chemistry student would think of, is we've talked about the hydrogen fuel cells, and is hydrogen combustion an option as well? Or I recently was reading about the fact that hydrogen blending into natural gas, just as, today we are doing ethanol blending into petrol, sort of like reducing the footprint, if not. Yes. Are those realistic options, or is fuel cell really the long-term approach to utilizing hydrogen?
So again, my comment about, heterogeneity as a part of life. Okay. So multiple options are there. But you see, the point is combustion of hydrogen doesn't make very high sense because if you were to look at combustion engines, their efficiency is in their 20s, fuel cell efficiency in the 50s.
True.
So obviously, once you have hydrogen, it makes far better sense to use it in a fuel cell rather than in an engine. But there are applications of hydrogen in, say, steel making.
Right.
Where there is already so much of burning happening, you can just put this in.
Okay.
You talked about HCNG. IOCL recently launched the first pump. And what they are doing is that they are having their natural gas. They are partially reforming their natural gas, increasing the hydrogen content in that natural gas, and blending that. So it is not that they have natural gas and they have hydrogen and they are building that. No? So it's an intermediate stage. So to change really the hydrogen component in the natural gas is what they are doing. After all, natural gas is, I think, CH4. So you are increasing that a little bit.
Okay. So from a fuel, coming back to fuel cells, right? I think And again, specifically for India, with the investments that obviously companies like KPIT are doing, and the National Chemical Laboratory and the other government of India institutions are doing, realistically, how far do we think is hydrogen fuel cells? Because in our cars, for example, EV, we are already lithium ion. We are already seeing them in even Indian-made cars today. Forget imports. And what can be done? And I guess the next logical question is, what can be done to further accelerate this? Because this is clearly needed.
So, as a company, we are not focusing on fuel cell cars. Okay, although we made the first fuel cell car.
Right. It was a technology demonstration or a concept.
It's like a technology demonstration. We believe that hydrogen is good for commercial vehicles and especially long distance commercial vehicles. Okay. They should be here in less than 2 years from now. Okay. So we are hoping to make more this year. Our hydrogen fuel cell bus should be ready shortly, and more number of those buses. In my opinion, they can happen in like this year and 21 and 22, etc. So I'm not looking at very long-term future for that. I'm looking at immediate term future. Hydrogen fuel cell cars, that's not something that we want to even look at. Okay. Because you see, but you could look at like an Innova, okay, which is more like a commercial vehicle,
right,
and an SUV, etc.
Yeah, the mini buses are what we call mini buses.
Yes. So anything which does more than 250 kilometers a day on a regular basis is a good candidate. And as you know, you can fill in hydrogen in a vehicle and it can run for 500 kilometers. A bus can run for 500 to 600 kilometers on the basis of current storage technologies and on the basis of current densities of fuel cells. So that is a very easy market to get into. Okay. It is also a very price conscious market. So if you can put on the table a very economically attractive solution, they will move for it immediately.
Okay.
And as far as cars are concerned, most of the cars are, as you know, the statistics is that most of the cars are driven not more than 20-25 kilometers per day. In the US also, it's not more than 40-45 kilometers per day. So besides, I believe that there is going to be a significant movement from personal vehicles to shared vehicles. Right. The shared vehicles will be commercial vehicles. The shared vehicles will be driven 400-500 kilometers in a day, and they could be good candidates for fuel cell.
Right. I think this is such an important area for us, and you're obviously taking the lead in it. But let me broaden the discussion now to the startup and the research space in Pune and all over the country. What kind of opportunities do you think young emerging startups as well as researchers in our institutions and labs have in the hydrogen economy or in the hydrogen fuel area? And do you think we are investing enough, focusing enough in this area, or people are not even aware of it?
So in the area of hydrogen, of course, you are looking at 4 broad areas. Hydrogen generation. So huge opportunities for low-cost hydrogen generation. Whether one is getting into reformation or whether one is getting into gasification, whether one is getting into electrolysis, photolysis, huge opportunities available for hydrogen generation. Again, huge opportunities available in storage and dispensing. Hydrogen storage is inordinately expensive just now. And there is no reason why it should be that expensive. It's essentially basically use of an aluminum container with some carbon composite. None of these two materials are really expensive, but the cost of transport of hydrogen is very high. And there is opportunity for reducing that. Then there is an opportunity for hydrogen dispensing. So I would say hydrogen generation, transportation, and dispensing. So storage and transportation is one area. Last one is dispensing. Here again, I think there is an opportunity for investment in that area. Lastly, the hydrogen usage, which is the fuel cell. We have worked on one part of fuel cell, which is really the low temperature PEM fuel cells, which are typically more relevant for automotive applications, because that is our area.
Right.
There are opportunities for SOFCs, or high temperature PEM cells. All these opportunities are open. I believe there is work to be done in these areas. But this work is not like working on an e-commerce platform.
Of course, it's
This is
heavy,
not,
serious engineering, science, and
yes,
science
yes,
and engineering.
Yes. So this is not something that 5 people can sit together and do in less than a year. We have been working at it for 5 years, and NCL has been working at it for even longer than that. So this is serious research in science, technology, and engineering, all three. And I think this is something that we need to work on. As a country, we need to work on.
Right. So I think from a policy standpoint, my discussion last week about biofuel specifically, we were talking about how policies have changed over the years, and lately they are quite supportive. Where do you think our policies are at the state and center level, primarily about hydrogen fuel, and where do they need to go to make this successful?
So a couple of things. There is policy in place for clean electric vehicles. Currently, they are focused on the battery electric because that's the only option available.
Right.
We have to make them applicable for hydrogen fuel cell. There are policy in place for biofuels. We have to make them applicable for biohydrogen. Actually, biofuel policy includes hydrogen.
Right.
We were engaged in development of that, and it specifically talks about hydrogen. And so we have policy framework in place. I think in the few years and with this government, the push for innovation is very high.
Right.
I believe things should happen. I think it's a private sector participation that we need now, rather than I wouldn't demand too much from policymakers.
Okay,
I think we have to do our bit now. We have to do our bit now.
Right. I mean, companies like KPIT need to get involved.
Yes.
KPIT is already doing its job, but we need a lot more private sector participation.
Yes.
You
Yes.
Recently, last year, published an excellent book where you talk about pole vaulting versus leapfrogging, the one that you co-wrote with Dr. Mashelkar. So what is the pole vaulting technology switch that is possible specifically in the fuel cell area, especially now that you've worked on it for 5 years or longer? See, it's a tough problem.
$1,500 to $60. That's good a pole vault.
Yeah, that would be amazing. EV has now come under 200, right? Or I need to check lithium ion.
Around 200.
So, that 60 would be amazing if we can get there in 5 years. Is that a realistic target?
That's possible.
I think that's.
And the book also, the book also talks about the 4 levers for making a change.
Right.
It talks about technology. It talks about policy. It talks about public awareness, and it talks about the customer market growth. So I think the 4 have to come together for this as well. I think it's a need for all. So there, we have talked about these 4 levers coming together, and we have to bring those together in this context also.
Absolutely. So I think we are running out of time. We are planned for 30 minutes, but I'll highlight some key points that we discussed. I think your point about heterogeneous fuels is very important because we need multiple options for different kinds of applications, whether it's within city, whether it's intercity, whether it's commercial vehicle versus private vehicles. And as a result of that, we may end up needing a combination of hydrogen fuel cells, lithium ion, combustion using biofuels, and a lot more. India as a country is energy starved, and we need a lot more. And then the pole vaulting example that you just now highlighted, I think right now we are at $1,500, $1,600 kilowatt hour, and that needs to go to 60. So that's a huge opportunity and a challenge to improve the cost. But we have seen these kind of breakthroughs in the semiconductor industry. And we are seeing some of that even in the lithium ion battery technology industry. So I think this is something we definitely need to aim for. we don't have any other choices. I think EV using lithium ion will solve some of our problems, but there are cases where hydrogen would be the right solution. So before we conclude, I would like to give you the last word. Any messages that you already mentioned what industries and startups need to consider, but message for them as well as students in this area. Do you think enough students are engaged in this area? Especially, I'm talking about the masters and PhDs.
Yes. So at KPIT, we do two initiatives every year. We do KPIT Sparkle, which about 20,000 students participating across the country now, where we celebrate innovation in college students. Last year, we started KPIT Shodh. It's an award for PhD students, the best PhD thesis in the area of energy in the country in the last 1 year.
Right.
So we are beginning to see some, sprouts, but a lot more needs to be done. I also believe that this desire to get into a unicorn in 3 years' time is something that has to go. I think the serious problems of the world need serious work. And I think our students have to slowly get into that. It's not just students, even companies have to do that. Because how long I feel pained that even our large companies are looking for foreign collaborations. At some point in time, we have to be in a position where we give technology collaboration rather than technology collaboration. So I think we need to work on that. So I think it's an ecosystem play. The industries have to do something, the students have to do something, the government has to do something. But unless we all put our shoulders to the wheel, we will not make this thing move. And I think we need to work together. So my last word is collaboration across the sectors, knowing fully well that more than any other country, climate change can be a bigger problem for our country. We have to solve our own problems.
I think that's a great message to end on. We need active collaboration between all stakeholders to solve this tough and interesting problem as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Ravi Pandit. This was a great discussion on new mobility and hydrogen fuels. We hope to continue this discussion with you in more detail around some of the specific technologies in some future online sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amit. Always a pleasure. Thank you.